My name is Jackin, and if you had told me even a year ago that I would be standing in the private dining hall of Alexander Maxwell, the man people whispered about as one of the richest and most untouchable men alive, I would have laughed in your face. My life was not glamorous, not shiny, not even close. It was messy, ordinary, and often painfully small. I was the kind of woman who worked long hours just to keep the lights on, who counted coins at the bottom of my bag to afford the bus, who smiled through exhaustion at customers because I needed every tip to survive. My world was gray and predictable, and sometimes I thought it would swallow me whole. But then, as it always happens in stories that feel too big to be real, something shifted, something cracked open, and I found myself swept into a current so strong I couldn't resist. That is how I ended up there, in that room, with Alexander's piercing eyes locked on mine, the weight of secrets pressing on my chest, and the terrifying awareness that nothing in my life would ever be the same again. I still remember the first time I heard his name spoken not as a rumor but as a possibility. A friend at the diner, someone who had a cousin working in the outer offices of one of his companies, leaned across the counter and whispered, "You know, he isn't as untouchable as people think. He's looking for someone real." I laughed at that, brushed it off like gossip, but the seed was planted. I went home that night and sat in my tiny apartment staring at the peeling paint on the walls, wondering what it would feel like to be seen by a man like him, to step out of the shadows of my invisible life. That wondering turned into a reckless impulse, and that impulse into action, and before I knew it, I was walking down a marble hallway toward doors taller than any I had ever seen, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might break through my ribs. When the doors opened, the sight stole my breath. The dining hall was drenched in golden light, chandeliers glittering like frozen rain, a table stretching longer than my entire apartment. And at the head of it, there he was, Alexander Maxwell. His presence filled the space in a way that words can't capture. He was not just a man, he was a force, his eyes sharp, his posture perfect, the kind of presence that made everyone else seem to shrink. And yet when his gaze met mine, I didn't feel small. I felt exposed, like he could see every part of me I tried to hide, and for some reason, he didn't look away. "Jackin," he said my name as though it belonged to him already, as though he had been waiting. My throat tightened, my palms damp, but I forced a smile and whispered back, "Mr. Maxwell." That was the beginning, the moment the world tilted and I began walking a path lined with both promises and shadows. Of course, I didn't know then what I know now. I didn't know that every smile had a question, every glance carried weight, every promise carried chains. All I knew in that instant was the dizzying thrill of being noticed, of being chosen, of stepping into a story larger than anything my life had prepared me for. The dinner that night was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Food I couldn't name was placed before me on porcelain plates, wine poured that shimmered like jewels in crystal glasses. Around the table sat men and women who looked like they belonged to another species, draped in wealth, their laughter soft and practiced, their words threaded with power. I should have felt out of place, I should have crumbled under the weight of my insignificance, but every time my nerves threatened to overwhelm me, I felt Alexander's gaze anchor me, pulling me back, holding me steadied. I told myself then that maybe this was fate, maybe this was the moment all my hardships had been leading to. But deep down, a smaller, quieter voice whispered that nothing comes without cost, and I would one day pay more than I could imagine. That first night was a blur of taste, sound, and sensation, but one detail has never left me, the way Alexander leaned close near the end of the meal, his voice low, almost tender, as he said, "You don't belong in the shadows, Jackin. Stay close to me, and you'll see what the world truly looks like." Those words wrapped around me like a spell, and I believed them, because I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe in a future brighter than the dim lights of my small apartment, brighter than the hopeless grind of survival, and so I stayed. But what I didn't understand yet was that stepping into his world meant stepping into a maze of lies, loyalty, and betrayal so tangled it would take everything I had to survive it. I knew from the very beginning that I couldn't simply walk into a family dinner and announce that I had won millions, because history had taught me exactly what their eyes would do, how their smiles would twist, how their hands would reach before their hearts. So instead, I decided to test them, to see if time had changed anything, to discover if blood had grown kinder with age or if old wounds still bled beneath the surface. The plan was simple. I would create a story, a fabrication small enough to be believable but grand enough to lure out the truth. One evening, I invited them all to my modest house, the same worn-out place with peeling wallpaper and a door that groaned each time it opened, because I wanted the stage to remain familiar, unthreatening, a place where they wouldn't suspect the storm I was conjuring. Anna arrived first, punctual as always, her perfume filling the air before she even stepped through the door, her eyes scanning the room not with affection but with calculation, as if noting what she might criticize. Michael came later, stumbling in with that careless grin, reeking of whiskey even though it wasn't yet 7 o'clock, his laugh too loud, his hugs too quick. We sat around the table I had scrubbed clean, the cheap candles flickering as if nervous, and I began weaving my lie. I told them I had met someone, a wealthy man, kind and generous, who had taken an interest in me, who had promised to help me pay off debts, maybe even help me start fresh. Their eyes lit up instantly, but not with joy for me, with hunger. Anna leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she asked what he did, how much he was worth, if he had family money or new money. Michael laughed, clapping me on the back as though I had pulled off the greatest trick of all, saying how lucky I was, how maybe my luck could rub off on him. I watched them carefully, every flicker of greed, every twitch of envy, and though my chest ached, I pretended not to notice. I said he had offered to help not just me but possibly the family too, maybe a loan to help Michael finally get back on his feet, maybe an investment in Anna's business idea she had always talked about but never acted on. That was when the mask slipped. Michael's grin turned sharp, his eyes narrowing as he asked how soon, how much, could he meet the man, could he call him tonight? Anna's lips pressed into a thin line, her voice lowering as she reminded me that she, not Michael, had always been the one responsible, that she deserved the first chance. I sat there in the flickering candlelight, listening to them argue not over me but over the imagined wealth of a stranger who didn't exist, and I realized with a cold certainty that my secret had been rightfully hidden. If they could turn on each other so quickly over the shadow of money, what would they do if they knew the truth was sitting in my drawer, locked away in a small fireproof box? By the end of the night, Anna left stiffly, her heels clicking like accusations, while Michael lingered too long, asking again and again when he could meet this mysterious man. I lied smoothly, saying soon, saying he traveled a lot, saying patience was needed, and though he nodded, I saw the calculation behind his eyes, the wheels already turning. When the house finally emptied and silence returned, I sat at the same table, the cheap candles burned down to stubs, and I let myself feel the weight of what I had learned. They hadn't changed. Not even time could soften them. The hunger for more, the desperation for an easier way, the willingness to take even at the expense of each other, it was all still there, waiting just beneath the surface like an animal crouched for attack. I whispered to myself that night that I had been right to keep my secret, right to test them, because now I knew without doubt, I couldn't trust them with the truth. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't yet see, was how the lie I had created would grow teeth of its own, how the story I spun to test them would begin to spin me, and how every choice from that night forward would tighten into a knot I would spend months trying to untangle. After that night I couldn't shake the image of my siblings fighting over a phantom, tearing at each other over the promise of a man who didn't even exist, and instead of relief it filled me with a hollow kind of dread because if they could turn so quickly on shadows, what would happen if I ever showed them the light? So I decided to push further, to test them again, to build a stage where truth and fiction blurred just enough to reveal what lay inside their hearts. A week later I called Anna, my voice deliberately trembling as if carrying a secret too heavy, and I told her that the man I had mentioned had hinted at helping me with something bigger, maybe buying me a small house outside the city. Nothing extravagant, just something safe, a place where I wouldn't have to count pennies to keep the heat on. And before I had even finished my sentence, she was already asking if there would be room for her and her kids, if maybe we could all live together, split the space, share the bills. Her tone was syrupy, but I could hear the calculation underneath. the way her words darted toward my supposed fortune like bees to honey. Later that evening I met Michael at a bar under the excuse of catching up, and I dropped hints of the same story, telling him my mysterious benefactor might introduce me to people who could help with investments. His eyes gleamed, his fingers drumming the table, and he leaned so close I could smell the stale alcohol on his breath as he whispered that maybe I could talk to the man for him, get him in on the ground floor of something big, that he had ideas, he just needed someone to believe in him, and the desperation in his voice was so raw it made my stomach twist. In the days that followed I spun the story wider, weaving details with care, a dinner here, a phone call there, just enough to make it believable, and like moths to a flame they circled closer and closer, their greed and envy shining through every word. I watched Anna start fights with Michael over imagined promises, listened as Michael hinted that he deserved more because he was the youngest and had suffered the most, and in quiet moments I wondered if maybe I had gone too far, if playing puppeteer with their hunger was cruel, but then I remembered the years of silence when I needed them, the times they left me stranded, the way they turned away when I cried for help, and I told myself this was not cruelty, it was clarity. One night I dreamed of my grandmother, her voice as soft as ever, asking me why I was feeding fire with fire, and I woke up with tears on my pillow, but when morning came I hardened again because the truth was already spreading like cracks in glass and there was no turning back. By the time Anna called demanding to know when she would meet this man, her voice sharp and brittle, I realized the lie had grown legs of its own, and Michael too had started dropping by unannounced, fishing for scraps of information, even checking my mail when he thought I wasn't looking. Trust, I saw, was already dead, and in its place bloomed suspicion, envy, and desperation, all aimed squarely at me. Sitting alone at night, the winning ticket locked away in its box, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to the dark that maybe this was the only way to truly know them, maybe the only way to protect myself was to watch how far they would go when chasing a dream that didn't exist. And though a part of me feared I was playing with fire, another part of me knew the flames would come whether or not I struck the match. It didn't take long for the cracks to widen, for the little web I had spun to start pulling tight around my own throat, because greed doesn't wait patiently, it gnaws and claws until there is nothing left, and soon Anna and Michael grew restless with my vague promises. Anna called me at odd hours, her voice sharp with suspicion as she demanded details, pressing for names, for dates, for anything concrete, and when I hesitated she grew colder, accusing me of holding back, of being selfish, of always keeping things to myself. Michael, on the other hand, grew more frantic, showing up at my doorstep unannounced, pounding until my neighbors peeked through their curtains, his words slurred with desperation as he begged to be introduced to the man I had invented, swearing this was his one shot, that I couldn't keep it from him. I felt cornered, the walls of my own house closing in, and though I smiled and lied and smoothed things over, I knew I couldn't keep this charade alive forever. One evening Anna and Michael arrived together, an unusual alliance forged out of shared suspicion, and they sat in my living room, eyes hard, lips pressed tight, as though they had rehearsed their lines beforehand. Anna leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping against the armrest as she said she didn't believe me anymore, that she had checked around, asked questions, and no one had ever seen me with this supposed man. Michael chimed in, his voice sharp, asking if I had made it all up, if I was mocking them, if I was playing games with their lives. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst, but I forced a laugh, feigned indignation, spun another layer to the lie, claiming he was private, that he didn't like attention, that they were only making things worse by pressing. But even as I spoke I saw the doubt in their eyes curdle into anger. That night after they left the silence in my house felt different, heavy and watchful, and I realized they no longer trusted me, they were hunting me, circling like predators around prey they had cornered. In the days that followed I caught Michael lurking near my work, his figure leaning against the diner wall, pretending to smoke while his eyes tracked me. Anna called mutual friends, digging for information, and whispers began to trickle back to me, stories that she was telling people I was hiding something, that maybe I was lying about more than just a man. I lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, the winning ticket locked away, and for the first time the secret didn't feel like freedom, it felt like a noose. I knew then that my test had gone too far, that in trying to protect myself I had planted seeds of suspicion that now grew wild, choking everything in their path. And still, even knowing the danger, I couldn't bring myself to reveal the truth, because if this was how they acted over a ghost, what would they become when they knew the fortune was real? So I stayed silent, caught in the snare of my own making, waiting for the moment when everything would inevitably collapse. The night everything began to unravel started quietly, the kind of evening where the air outside was heavy and still, where even the streetlights seemed dimmer, and I thought maybe I had earned a moment of peace, but peace has never lingered long in my life. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes I didn't need to wash just to keep my hands busy, when I heard the knock at the door, sharp and insistent, not the friendly kind but the kind that demanded. When I opened it, Anna and Michael stood there together again, their faces tight with something between anger and triumph, and before I could speak they pushed past me into the living room. Anna held up an envelope, her voice cutting as she told me they had seen things, heard things, that someone at the bank mentioned I'd been inquiring about lawyers and accounts, that someone else had seen me buying files and boxes as if preparing for something big. My stomach dropped because I had been careful. I thought I had hidden every step, but greed sharpens the senses of those who want a peace, and now they were circling closer to the truth. Michael's voice rose, accusing me of lying all along, of hiding something real behind the mask of the story I had fed them. I denied it, my words tumbling too fast, my hands trembling as I insisted there was nothing, but the more I spoke the less they believed. Anna's eyes narrowed, sharp as knives, and she said she wanted to see the drawer in my bedroom, the one I had foolishly locked so tightly that it drew attention. I froze, the silence betraying me, and Michael smirked as if he had won. I tried to change the subject, to push them out, but Michael moved faster than I expected, striding down the hallway as Anna blocked me with her body. Panic clawed up my throat as I shouted for him to stop, but he was already at the drawer, already rattling the handle, already looking at me with a twisted kind of satisfaction. My heart raced so hard I thought I might collapse, because inside that drawer, inside that fireproof box, was the ticket, the truth, the one thing I could not let them see. Somehow I managed to grab the keys before him, to push him back with a strength I didn't know I still had, my voice shaking as I screamed that they had no right, that this was my home, my space, and for a moment they froze, shocked by my fury. But the damage was done. The air between us was poisoned, thick with suspicion and rage. They left soon after, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled, but I knew they wouldn't stop there. That night I sat by the locked drawer, my back against it, listening to the silence and wondering how long until they came back, how long until the secret I had guarded so carefully exploded into the open. And as the hours dragged by, I realized the truth. I was no longer just testing them, they were hunting me, and the game I had started was about to turn deadly real. In the days after that confrontation I lived like a shadow in my own house, every creak of the floorboards making me flinch, every phone call setting my nerves on edge, because I knew Anna and Michael were circling, waiting, plotting, and I could feel their hunger pressing against the walls. I started carrying the box with the ticket from room to room, terrified to leave it behind even for a moment, and at night I tucked it beneath my pillow as though it could shield me from the storm I had unleashed. I tried to act normal at the diner, smiling at customers, refilling coffee cups, but my mind was never there, it was always racing, always calculating what they might do next. One afternoon Anna showed up at the diner, her smile too sweet, her tone dripping with fake concern as she asked if I needed help with bills, if I wanted her to move in with me so I wouldn't be so alone, and though her words sounded kind I could see the sharpness in her eyes, the unspoken demand behind her offer. That night Michael appeared on my porch, drunk and desperate, pounding until I opened the door, and he stumbled inside talking too fast, telling me he had debts collectors were calling about, telling me if I had anything, anything at all, I should give it to him before things got ugly. His voice cracked, his hands trembled, and for a fleeting moment I almost pitied him, but then I remembered the drawer, the smirk on his face, and I knew pity was a trap. I told him I had nothing, that the stories were lies, that he needed to stop, and his expression hardened into something I had never seen before, something that made me shiver. After he left, I locked every door, every window, but even then I didn't feel safe, because danger wasn't just outside anymore, it was in my bloodline, wearing familiar faces. Sleep came only in fragments, broken by nightmares of Anna rifling through my things, of Michael tearing the box from my hands, of the ticket burning before I could use it. I began to wonder if maybe the money wasn't a blessing at all but a curse, a cruel joke that dangled freedom only to trap me deeper. Still, I couldn't bring myself to let go of it, couldn't bring myself to imagine walking away, because even as it poisoned everything, it was the only chance I had ever had. I started making quiet plans, researching new towns, looking up apartments far from here, places where no one knew me, where family couldn't follow, and in those stolen moments of dreaming I felt a flicker of hope. But reality always returned in the form of another call, another knock, another reminder that Anna and Michael were not letting go. The circle was tightening, and I could feel time slipping through my fingers, carrying me toward a collision I no longer had the strength to avoid. I knew I couldn't live like that forever, jumping at shadows and whispers, sleeping with a box under my pillow as though it were a lifeline, so one morning I finally admitted to myself that escape was the only option left. I sat at the kitchen table with the curtains drawn tight, scribbling lists in the margins of old receipts, bus routes, rental prices in towns hours away, places where no one would know the name Cassie, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of control return. I began quietly selling little things, jewelry I never wore, furniture I could do without, telling neighbors I was decluttering, telling coworkers I was simplifying, but inside I was building a plan to vanish. Each step felt dangerous, each movement like walking a tightrope, and I thought I was careful enough, invisible enough, until the day Anna appeared unannounced, her eyes sweeping over the half-empty shelves, her lips tightening as she asked why I was getting rid of things. I lied easily, saying I wanted space, that I was tired of clutter, but her gaze lingered too long, and I knew she didn't believe me. That evening Michael called, his voice slurred but sharp, saying he heard from someone that I was planning a move, asking me straight out if I was leaving him behind. My blood ran cold because if they knew, if they suspected, then everything I had worked for could collapse before I ever made it to the bus station. Days later they both showed up together, no warning, storming into my living room like they owned it, demanding answers. Anna's voice was icy as she accused me of betraying family, of trying to take something that belonged to all of us, while Michael shouted louder and louder, his fists clenching as though ready to force the truth out of me. I tried to stand tall, to insist I had nothing, but my shaking hands betrayed me. Anna's eyes darted toward the locked box under the couch, and she stepped forward as if to grab it, but I lunged first, pulling it tight against my chest, shouting that it was mine. The room erupted, voices clashing, years of resentment spilling into the air, and for the first time I saw them not as siblings but as strangers, as predators who would stop at nothing. The confrontation ended with slammed doors and threats thrown into the night, but I knew then I was out of time. Whatever love had once existed had rotted away, replaced by something sharp and dangerous, and if I didn't leave soon I might never leave at all. That night as I lay awake listening for footsteps outside my window, I made a silent vow: I would not let them take me down, I would not let them steal the one chance I had fought my whole life for. I didn't know how yet, but I would run, and I would survive. The plan became my heartbeat, every thought, every action consumed by the single goal of getting out before Anna and Michael closed in for good. I packed at night in silence, slipping clothes into a single worn suitcase, folding documents into an envelope I kept pressed to my chest, and always the box with the ticket hidden under my bed until the final moment. I checked bus schedules, memorized departure times, rehearsed the walk from my house to the station over and over in my mind until it felt like muscle memory. Yet even as I planned each detail I felt eyes on me, shadows stretching long in places they hadn't before. Anna called constantly, her voice pretending concern but laced with accusation, asking where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. Michael appeared more often than ever, sometimes just standing across the street from my house, smoking, watching, waiting, as if daring me to move. My heart lived in my throat, pounding each time I pulled the curtains back, each time the phone rang. I tried to keep my face calm at the diner, tried to smile, but my coworkers whispered that I looked pale, thinner, worn down. They didn't know the storm brewing around me, the secret that weighed heavier with every passing day. The night before I was supposed to leave, I barely slept. I sat in the living room clutching the box, staring at the door, half expecting it to burst open. At one point I thought I heard footsteps on the porch, but when I opened the door there was only silence, the street empty under the dull yellow glow of the lamp. Still I couldn't shake the feeling that Anna and Michael were out there, waiting, and I knew deep in my bones they would not let me go without a fight. When dawn broke I dressed quickly, heart pounding, grabbed the suitcase, the envelope, the box, and stepped outside into the chill morning air. Each step toward the station felt heavy, as though the earth itself was trying to hold me back, and with every corner I turned I looked over my shoulder, certain I would see them following. And then, just as I reached the end of my street, I heard a voice call my name. Sharp. Familiar. I froze. Anna stood there, Michael beside her, both blocking the path, their eyes hard, their bodies tense. My suitcase slipped from my hand, thudding against the pavement, and for a moment the world fell silent. This was it. The confrontation I had feared, the one I had tried so hard to outrun, had finally found me. Anna's voice cut through the morning air like broken glass, sharp and merciless, and Michael stood beside her with his arms crossed, his jaw clenched so tight the veins in his neck bulged, and I knew in that instant there was no more pretending, no more weaving stories to keep them away, because the truth was pressing at the edges, begging to be set free. "Where are you going, Cassie?" Anna demanded, her eyes darting to the suitcase, then to the box clutched against my chest. "Running off in the middle of the night? Hiding something from your own family?" I swallowed hard, the words choking in my throat, because everything I wanted to say, about the years of neglect, the nights I cried alone, the debts I carried while they turned their backs, rose up like fire and left me trembling. Michael stepped closer, his voice low but dangerous, saying he was done with the lies, that he knew I had something locked away, that if I thought I could just vanish without sharing it, I was wrong. My pulse thundered in my ears as I backed away, clutching the box tighter, and I heard myself whisper that it was mine, that it had always been mine, that they had no right to it. Anna laughed, bitter and cold, saying family means sharing, saying if I had been blessed it was my duty to give back, and her words twisted like a knife because I remembered all the times I had begged them for scraps of help, all the times they turned away. My anger boiled over, and before I could stop myself I shouted that I had won, that the lies about the mysterious man were only a smokescreen, that the truth was I had a ticket, a lottery ticket that had changed everything. Silence crashed over us, heavy and absolute, as the words hung in the air. Anna's eyes widened, Michael's fists unclenched in shock, and for a heartbeat we stood frozen in the ruins of my secret. Then everything broke. Anna lunged forward, her hands reaching for the box, screaming that I was selfish, that I had always been selfish, while Michael grabbed my arm, pulling, demanding to see it, demanding I prove it. The street was empty but the sound of our struggle echoed, a cacophony of shouts and sobs, and I fought with everything in me, clutching the box as though my life depended on it. "You weren't there when I needed you," I screamed, tears blurring my vision. "You left me to drown and now you come for me only because of this." My voice cracked, raw with years of pain, and for the first time I saw something flicker in their eyes, not just greed but guilt, though it was fleeting, swallowed quickly by desperation. Michael shouted that we were family, that family means everything, but the way his nails dug into my skin betrayed the hollowness of his words. Anna wept, or maybe it was rage disguised as tears, crying that she deserved it too, that she had children to care for, that I couldn't keep it all. And in that chaos, in that desperate tug of war on a quiet street at dawn, I realized the truth. The ticket had not created this fracture, it had only revealed it, peeling back the veneer to show the rot beneath. My strength surged, fueled by fury and sorrow, and with a cry I wrenched myself free, clutching the box to my chest, stumbling back until there was space between us. "You will not take this from me," I said, my voice shaking but strong, because it was never about the money, it was about seeing who you really are. The words hung there, final, echoing like the toll of a bell, and though Anna and Michael stood frozen, their faces pale with shock and rage, I knew the end had come. For a long moment we just stood there in the pale morning light, three broken pieces of what once passed for a family, our chests heaving, our eyes wet, and I realized that whatever bond we once had was gone, burned away by greed and betrayal, and there was no going back. I held the box tight against me, feeling its edges dig into my arms, and I knew I had a choice: stay here and let them devour me until there was nothing left, or walk away and finally claim the freedom I had always been denied. My legs trembled, but they carried me forward, past Anna's shaking frame, past Michael's clenched fists, each step a rebellion, each step a severing of ties that had chained me for too long. They shouted after me, voices cracked with fury and desperation, but I didn't turn around, not once, because if I looked back I might falter, and I couldn't afford that anymore. At the bus station I sat alone with the box on my lap, the air thick with the scent of diesel and coffee, the sound of departures echoing like a hymn of salvation, and for the first time in years I felt light, as though the weight of their expectations, their cruelty, their demands had finally slid from my shoulders. I thought of the years I had spent sacrificing for them, of the times I begged for help that never came, of the nights I went hungry while they lived comfortably, and I understood then that love without respect is just another prison. The ticket wasn't just money, it was proof that fate had given me a chance to rewrite my story, to cut the threads that tied me to people who never truly saw me, and though it came wrapped in lies and fear, it also gave me the courage to choose myself for once. As the bus pulled away I watched the streets blur into distance, the town shrinking behind me, and I whispered a goodbye that was more of a release than a farewell. I didn't know what the future would hold, didn't know if wealth would bring joy or new trials, but I knew one thing for certain: I would never again let others decide my worth, never again let their greed dictate my path. I was free, bruised but unbroken, scarred but still standing, and sometimes that is the greatest victory of all. And now I want to turn to you, the one listening to my story, because maybe you've felt that same weight, maybe you've known the sting of betrayal by those who should have loved you most, and maybe you've wondered if choosing yourself makes you selfish. I'm here to tell you it doesn't. Choosing yourself means survival, it means freedom, it means honoring the life you were given. Tell me, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have kept the secret? Would you have shared it? Would you have walked away? I want to hear your thoughts, your heart, your truth, so leave me a comment and let's talk about it together.